Justin Fields calms nerves. The Jets find their formula, and a top defensive lineman returns. Locked On Jets begins now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, August 11th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you every day, as this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And our episode today is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We have nothing but good news to discuss today on Locked On Jets. The Jets are getting one of their top defensive linemen back, and the Jets played a fantastic game Saturday night in their preseason opener. They blew out the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. The final score was 30-10. It was a great performance by the third team offensive defense. It was a great performance by the second team offensive defense, and it was a great performance by the first team offense and defense. And I think storyline number one from this game is Justin Fields calmed some nerves. Fields had a very strong performance, 3 of 4 throwing the football for 42 yards, also ran the ball twice for 14 yards and a touchdown. It was pretty much an ideal start to the preseason for the New York Jets and for the quarterback, Justin Fields. As on Friday's show, I mentioned that, the way Justin Fields plays should not make us too crazy. It's better for him to play well than it is for him to play poorly. But at the end of the day, these are all about getting ready for the season. If you play well, it shows some things that you can execute. It's something you can build on. It's the type of thing that can help you grow confidence. If you play poorly, it shows you what you need to fix. It gives the Jets a chance to go back to the practice field and figure out the things that did not work out. These players should never be under such a microscope in the exhibition season. And I don't know how that's a hot take now, but I feel like that's now a hot take based on the way the NFL is covered. And a lot of this is like the NFL is a league now where everyone's under the microscope. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Every little thing is scrutinized. And this was never more true than last week. And while I don't think, Justin Fields playing well or playing poorly in the preseason makes all that big of a difference, I think that goes double for the training camp practices. And last week, around the Jets, around the media, around the fan base, the big talk was how much Justin Fields was struggling in practice. Now, he strung together a series of poor practices, and this led to panic from some corners of the Jets fan base. It led to concern from other corners of the Jets fan base, and it drew attention. And Saturday's game shows that practice doesn't really make that big of a difference. You can have a couple of poor practices and still go out when the game starts and play effectively. And I think that we forget what the point of the exhibition games and what training camp are. The point of the point of practices, the point of preseason games is not for you to do everything at the highest level possible. It's to get yourself ready for the season. It's been a long off season. Players are back on the field now. They're working. They're shaking off the rust. And the Jets are also installing a new system. Whenever you install a new system, there are going to be problems along the way. There are going to be things to work out. Guys are still, learning the very basics. And the way the media operates right now, we've taken preparation for the season, and we've taken the natural process of working through problems, and we've turned it into a crisis. Because last week, the talk was all about Justin Fields struggling in practice. And a point that I make frequently on this show is, we get to October and a guy has 2 or 3 bad practices, nobody cares. But when it happens in August, when we are over a month away from the first game of the season, it's like a panic. It's like a crisis mode. I mean, there are lots of reasons for it, but we just saw that this past week should give you a vivid example as to why you should just relax. You should take it as it comes. And something, you can not only give yourself more relaxation with this approach, you can be a smarter fan, because a couple bad practices did not prevent Justin Fields from going out and playing well in the first exhibition game. And this was kind of a preview of what the Jets want Justin Fields to be. He was efficient with the football. He was 3 for 4 for 42 yards. He did not try and do too much. A lot of those were pretty short, basic passes where the receiver did a lot of the work after the catch. You also saw some of the bad of Justin Fields. Now, there wasn't much bad, but he did miss one easy throw to Garrett Wilson on the sideline. And he added something with his legs. That 13-yard touchdown run, that was a really nice play on a scramble. in just one series, you kind of got the full Justin Fields experience. You kind of got the quarterback you just want him to be this year. He's a guy who will add certain things. He'll take certain things off the table. You just hope at the end of the day you get enough production from Fields. You know what I liked about the touchdown? The touchdown Fields scored kind of made me think about the way the NFL has evolved over the last 15 to 20 years. Because I think 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, a quarterback like Fields would have very little chance of succeeding in this league. And that goes back to the way players were coached back then. 10, 15 years ago, there was this view in the NFL that there was a right way to move the ball for a quarterback and a wrong way to move the ball for a quarterback. A quarterback would drop back in the pocket. And even if he was mobile, he was told, you have to go through your progressions at all times. You only scramble when everything breaks down. And on that touchdown Saturday night, Fields saw daylight and he took off. And I think a good principle for Fields this year is that no matter where he is in his progression, if he sees an opening in front of him, he should run the football. And you know something? It probably will take some passing plays off the board for the Jets, but over the long run, Fields' legs, Fields' ability to run will make up for it. He'll be able to produce big plays on the ground because there aren't many quarterbacks with Justin Fields' speed. There aren't many quarterbacks with Justin Fields' ability to make things happen on the ground. And it's not necessary for Fields to sit back there and go through all of his progressions. Now, if nothing's in front of him, that's fine. If there's no daylight in front of him, then yeah, he should try and make his reads. He's going to have to complete passes during the season. Everybody knows that. Fields is not going to be able to run the ball 100% of the time. But in the past, in the NFL, what Fields did, taking off and running because he saw an opportunity to run, coaches would actually criticize him for that. He'd actually be told that's the wrong way to operate, that there was only one way to play the quarterback position. And I think for the Jets this year, one of the things that's really intriguing is that they're kind of going to try and do things a different way. They're going to take a guy who, look, again, they're going to need Fields to throw the ball effectively. They're going to need Fields to be able to operate from the pocket. But Fields adds other things to the system. Fields' ability to improvise, his ability to do things off script, will give the Jets opportunities to make plays that won't require him to stand in the pocket. And, Jets did not really get to the designed run game around Justin Fields Saturday night, but that's another thing that will come. It's another thing that I think could enhance the conventional run game. I think, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, they're going to be better backs when the defense has to account for the threat of Fields potentially faking a handoff every time they get the ball and then moving around. It was a very good performance by Justin Fields. I think this was exactly the start the Jets wanted for the 2025 preseason. In part because it shows that they're kind of on the right track to get ready for the season, but also because Fields was able to kind of, at least for one night, silence all of the crazy talk around him. And something, my message would be consistent no matter how this went. If Fields was struggling in practice and struggled in the games, I would be telling you it's not a big deal. You should be patient. If Fields was playing great in practices and great in the games, I'd tell you, be patient. Don't panic when the inevitable bad moment comes. If Fields was having great practice and struggled on Saturday night, it wouldn't be a big deal. And it's not a big deal when he's struggling in practice and playing great in the games. It's all about getting ready for the season. It's all about giving you a preview of what's to come. And I think Fields did that in a very effective way on Saturday. But Fields was not the only Jet to play effective in the preseason opener against the Green Bay Packers. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to discuss why the formula we saw Saturday night is the formula the Jets need to carry into the season. Even though we didn't see the starters that much, we're going to hope that preseason week 1 is a preview of regular season week 1. I'll explain as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season's back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Jets are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. And with the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you, everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We are recapping a Jets preseason victory. They defeated the Green Bay Packers Saturday night at Lambeau Field. The final score was 30-10, an absolutely dominant performance, an absolutely stellar performance by the New York Jets across the board. And it began with the first team offense and defense. If you watch that game, the first quarter, it was clear the Jets starters were very crisp and the Packers starters were very not. And I think that in many ways, what you saw from the Jets' first team is the formula Aaron Glenn and this team want to carry into the week one game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's been a lot of talk during the course of training camp of how physical this is, how intense training camp is this year under Aaron Glenn. And we didn't see enough of the Jets and Packers starters to say for sure, like whether that was a difference on Saturday night. But one thing we do know is if you watch early season games in the NFL in this era, week 1, week 2, even week 3, you see a lot of really, really sloppy football. You see guys that don't seem totally prepared for the season. And that goes back in many ways, I think, to the way teams prepare for the season. Teams don't take the exhibition season seriously anymore. Teams do not run intense training camps because they're not allowed to. The players negotiated so that teams are no longer allowed to have 2 practices a day. The hitting has been greatly reduced in training camp practices. And it shows when you look at how poor the quality of play is early in the regular season. And my theory for years has been that a team that runs a relatively more intense training camp might have an advantage for the first couple of weeks of the season. We'll see how well that theory pans out this year when the Jets take the field during the regular season. Of course, a great quarter by the starters against the Packers doesn't guarantee anything week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but you definitely saw a team that looked more prepared to play this game. Now, it is exhibition season. I don't know if the Packers starters were all that interested in playing in that game, but that was something that really stuck out to me was how much it seemed like the Jets wanted to be there and how seriously the Jets were taking the game. And, there was one play which has kind of been passed around social media where the Jets committed a penalty and Aaron Glenn screamed at the guy who committed the penalty. And I think this kind of speaks to like Aaron Glenn's mindset. Do I think Glenn really cares whether or not the Jets win a game in the preseason? No, I don't think Glenn's going to look back this season and say that the Jets' success or failure was determined by their preseason record. But I do think Glenn's trying to kind of instill a mindset in this team that you take everything seriously, that you go all out with every task you do. And I think in Glenn's mind, that's how you build a successful program. That's how you build a winning team, is that you never take a day off. You take even the exhibition season seriously. And the results, obviously, in the first week of the preseason was very good. But going a little deeper, I think that there are many things that the Jets would like to carry over from this Packers game into the regular season. And I think stylistically, you saw a lot of the things that the Jets want to do. We talked about Justin Fields in the first segment. Justin Fields played quarterback the way the Jets want him to play quarterback, where maybe it's a little unconventional, but they will want Fields to hit passes from the pocket, but they'll want him to do so much more other than that. They'll want him to be able to make plays with his legs. Another thing that kind of stood out to me was the offensive line played very well for the Jets. And this was not their starting offensive line because John Simpson was out. So Josh Myers started at center. Joe Tippmann started at left guard. They moved Tippmann over back to the guard position. Fields had a lot of time. And some of his passes were, maybe kind of like checkdowns because the Packers dropped so deep in their zones. And by the time Fields was back there and scanned, the Packers had dropped so far down the field that he could just dump it off and the guy who caught the ball could run up the field for a big gain. The offensive line, I thought, did a very good job. Armand Bembou, the rookie guy we talked about on Friday in our game preview, one of the key players to watch, 10 pass blocking reps, 0 pressures allowed. That's what you like to see. And we can't say for sure whether Armand Bembou is going to be a good player based on 10 pass rushing snaps. But I will say that sometimes in the exhibition season, you can start to tell whether a guy's completely in over his head, whether a guy's completely overmatched. I've seen rookie offensive linemen in preseason games look completely lost, and you knew you had a problem right off the bat. I remember in 2010 when the Jets drafted Vladimir Dukas in the second round out of UMass. They played the Giants the preseason opener that year, and I watched him like 2 plays, and I knew this guy's not going to be able to help the Jets this year. Bembou did not look like he was in over his head. That was a very positive development. And the offensive line, an offensive line which is not the starting unit, offensive line which had to have an adjustment because of John Simpson's injury, looked like it was really gelling as a unit. It looked like a very solid group up front, something the Jets need. Tanner Engstrand. Look, I'm not going to go overboard declaring Engstrand the NFL's next offensive genius based on the performance in one exhibition game. But you saw some very well-designed concepts from Engstrand. On the touchdown drive, Justin Fields hit a third down pass to Tyler Johnson. It was a very well-designed play. I really was impressed with how that play was drawn up because Johnson essentially started bunched with a couple other receivers, which created traffic. And essentially, Johnson followed them up the field. The receivers ran off the defenders in zone covers. The receivers ran up the field. The zone defenders followed them, and suddenly there was an opening for Johnson to just kind of sit in the zone and catch a pass and move the chains. Defensive side of the ball, I thought the Jets' first team also looked very good. When we talk about players the Jets are going to depend on in the regular season, Sauce Gardner's at the top of the list. This is a defense where I think Sauce Gardner is now going to be the most important player because the Jets are going to go to a heavy blitz scheme, especially on the money downs, especially on third down. The Jets are going to try and get after the quarterback, which is going to leave Sauce Gardner one-on-one with a lot of quality receivers. Now, Romeo Doubs is not an elite number one receiver, but you saw Sauce Gardner make a couple plays. Nobody really got open on Sauce Gardner in that game. So in many ways, I think you saw the formula that you want to see going forward from the Jets in this game. There was if you wanted to find one problem area, it existed, and that was penalties. Jets committed 10 penalties, and I did see a couple people from the fan base suggest, "Oh, this is just like last year. Jets committing a million penalties. Where's the discipline?" But I don't think it's really apples to apples to compare this with what the Jets did a year ago. And there are a couple of reasons for that. You're going to see a lot of penalties over the next two games in the exhibition season. And reasons for that, number one, a lot of the guys committing the penalties either aren't going to be on the team or aren't going to play big roles on the team. So it's not really, when the Jets committed a million penalties in the regular season game in 2024, that was a big deal. Doing it in the exhibition season where it's guys the Jets aren't really going to be leaning on for the most part, that's less of a big deal. You also have to consider it is August. It is training camp, as we mentioned. The point of these preseason games, the point of training camp practices is to prepare players for the start of the season. It's to get everybody ready, and you work through the mistakes and you start to shake off the rust. And there is going to be rust there, and guys are going to commit penalties because they've not been playing football the last couple of months. So it's when you get back into the rhythm, it takes some time to get going. Play is going to be sloppier, especially during this exhibition season. And part of the reason I think the Jets are going so hard in camp and in the exhibition season is that they want to shake off the rust before the start of the season. Because again, so many times you get to the start of the regular season and teams are still rusty. Jets want to get through that. And there's one other aspect of this. You're constantly shuffling offensive line. So there's going to be a ton of holding penalties because you have zero continuity on the offensive line between these, even within games. Like you go from one series to the next and the line has been shuffled. Somebody's moved from right tackle to right guard. Somebody's moved from left tackle to right tackle. There's no continuity on the offensive line, which is going to lead to penalties. Donovan Edwards had a 73-yard touchdown run wiped out on a holding call. It's just going to happen when you're dealing with guys who are, first of all, third, fourth stringers, and second of all, guys who have no experience playing together. So even the one complaint people have, I don't think is necessarily all that accurate. I think that this was a very, very, very encouraging performance for the Jets. And on tomorrow's show, we'll go through the Jets stock report. We'll talk about who's up and who's down after this first preseason game. But ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to leave Lambeau Field and we're going to focus on a key player who's returning to the lineup for the Jets. And he's a very important player. Jermaine Johnson is back and has big implications for the Jets that we'll discuss as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I've used Gametime myself, and it's not just for concerts. You can go to sports, if you're looking for Jets tickets, theater, comedy, you name it. It's on Gametime, and again, they have amazing last-minute deals and the all-in pricing. No surprise prices when you check out. You know what you're going to pay for ahead of time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets and concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. Nothing but good news for the Jets this weekend. They dominated the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field in their exhibition opener on Saturday night. The final score of that game was 30-10. Then on Sunday, the Jets got some really good news. Jermaine Johnson is coming off the physically unable to perform list. Jermaine has passed his physical, and he is scheduled to return to practice for the New York Jets on Tuesday. Now, none of this was a surprise. If you go back to the offseason program, Aaron Glenn mentioned that Jermaine Johnson, as he recovered from his Achilles injury, was probably not going to be ready for the start of training camp, but the Jets were fully expecting him to be ready for week 1 of the regular season. And that's exactly what happened. So I guess we can trust the Aaron Glenn injury reports. As you may remember with Robert Saleh, his injury reports to the public were not always the most accurate. So Aaron Glenn, telling us what's going to happen, and it actually happens. There's a bit of change for the New York Jets. Jermaine coming back, though, is a big deal for this defense, because this is not a defensive line that has the depth of years past. This is not the defensive end position of 2023 when the Jets could roll 4 deep, where they had John Franklin Myers on one end, Jermaine on the other, Bryce Huff as the situational pass rusher, and first-round pick Will McDonald as your number 4 guy. That was a very, very deep group of defensive ends. The Jets lack that depth this year. The Jets right now have McDonald, who's a good pass rusher, a guy who very easily could get double-digit sacks again, and they have Jermaine. And after that, it gets very, very thin very fast. So, Michael Clemens, you don't really want him to have a big role. Can Braden McGregor grow into a player? I guess it's possible, but it's that's just speculation. So Jets really need Jermaine. They don't really have quality backups right now at the defensive end position. And Jermaine's probably the most complete defensive end the Jets have, because he can both get to the pass rusher, he can both get to the quarterback as a pass rusher and play the run effectively. I think that the Jets really missed Jermaine last year. If you look at their season-long run defense stats, it wasn't bad. In fact, in some areas, their season-long run defense stats were pretty good. But if you watch the Jets on a game-to-game basis, that there were some games where they could not stop the run, or some games where they lost because for a portion of the game, they just got gashed by the other team's rushing attack. And one of the challenges the Jets had was they didn't really have many good pass rushers on their team, which meant that Will McDonald had to play a really extended series of snaps. And McDonald, for all of his pass rushing skill last year, was really struggling against the run. But the Jets had to put him on the field because nobody else could get to the quarterback. In Jermaine Johnson, you have a guy you can put on the field who can get to the quarterback, a guy who's very great athlete, but a guy who can also hold up in the run game. He's a complete defensive end. The Jets really will need Jermaine this year. Now, I think the Jets are going to be smart with Jermaine. He's coming off an Achilles injury, so I don't think they're going to overload his snap count early in the season. I would not be surprised the first couple of weeks if they kept him on kind of a pitch count. And that's the type of thing that will limit the Jets in the first couple of weeks, because, again, they don't have great depth, which means we're probably going to see more of Michael Clemens than we would want to. But it's for the greater good. You want Jermaine fully healthy. You want him fully comfortable. You want him fully acclimated in the lineup once we get to October, November, December, January. He's going to be a key player on this defense. He's going to be one of the most important players on the team. He's going to be one of the most important players on the defensive line. He's going to be one of the most important players on the defense. The question is, how quickly and how fully can he recover from the Achilles injury? We know Achilles injuries can be scary. If you look across the NFL, there are lots of guys who suffer those injuries at various positions who are never the same again. Now, if you're the Jets, one of the things you can take heart in is there was a successful recovery from an Achilles injury last year. It wasn't Aaron Rodgers. It was Elijah Vera Tucker. AVT may play a different position at guard, but it shows you that the Achilles injury is not always a career ender, but it is kind of a scary thing. Jermaine has a lot on the line this year for the Jets. Jermaine is the one of the 3 guys the Jets drafted in the first round of 2022 who doesn't have a contract extension yet. Garrett Wilson got his extension. Sauce Gardner got his extension. The Jets decided to hold off on Jermaine. They did pick up his 5th-year option, which is around $13 million for 2026, but they have not committed long-term yet. And it's pretty obvious why they haven't committed long-term yet. It's the right move. They need to make sure Jermaine is able to come back and still play at a high level. You don't want to give a guy a big contract right off a serious injury. Jets have been burned on that before. That happened with Muhammad Wilkerson back in 2015. Muhammad Wilkerson had a great year, but suffered a serious leg injury the last game of that season, and the Jets lost in Buffalo. Jets gave him a big contract that offseason, and he was never really the same. He never really fully recovered from the leg injury. So you got to see Jermaine do it. Now, if Jermaine gets off to a hot start this year, if we see something like 3 sacks in the first 5 games and he looks like he's moving well, and he looks like he's fully recovered, I think the odds are pretty good that the Jets will start talking extension with Jermaine. But it's a matter that they need to see it. And this is, again, a guy who's a critical piece on this defense, a guy who, one of the few guys on this team who can do both on the defensive line, who can play the run and can get after the quarterback. So it's very good for the Jets to see him back. He'll now have a couple of weeks to get ready. I'm not sure they're going to play him in the exhibition games. He still hasn't been on the practice field yet. There's still quite a bit to work him back into. We may not. I would be shocked if we saw him this week against the Giants in the exhibition season. 2 weeks from now against the Eagles, I guess it's possible, but the Jets may just want to hold him out, just make sure he's ready for week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But unmistakable, it's a big move in the right direction for the New York Jets to get Jermaine Johnson back. He's a very good defensive lineman. You hope he's able to fully recover from the injuries. If he can, he's the type of guy who can help this defense get to the next level. Not only that, but I think Aaron Glenn's system is going to make everything easier for the defensive lineman rushing the passer, because when you have extra blitzers, it means you get more favorable matchups. The more guys who rush, the more one-on-ones you get. So it's the type of thing that could unlock Jermaine and take his pass rushing ability to the next level, as long as he's healthy. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoyed the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.